Joel finished the septic tank and leach field, so his work was pretty much finished, but we would bring him back in for one final project later that we agreed on earlier in the year. It was time for electrical and plumbing. I knew a guy who was a plumber and another who was an electrician, so I thought, why not ask those guys to do the work, because I wanted it done right. The rest of the cabin was all on us now, and we were really looking forward to it.
I hate painting.
We wanted to get the loft finished enough so we could use it to sleep in because it would be out of the way of the rest of the cabin where all the work needed to be done. One of my hobbies is adventure motorcycle riding. Occasionally I ride my bike to the cabin, and I really enjoy finding different routes to the area. One of my favorites in the general vicinity is Phantom Canyon. It starts near Victor and ends near Canyon City. I think you'll agree it's a beautiful area. In April of 2014, I got a call from the company that was insuring my cabin. They had an inspector out at the cabin a couple weeks earlier who has now made some pretty significant demands, or they'd drop my coverage on the cabin. The first was to skirt the cabin with some type of fireproof material. Second was the private road leading into my cabin must be a minimum of 16 feet wide to allow for a fire truck to get into the area. Third, and pretty insignificant, was to add a handrail to the back steps. Fourth, another simple one, was to make sure the propane tanks are kept a minimum of 10 feet from the cabin. Fifth, all brush and grasses must be kept mowed within a 200-foot radius of the cabin. But they did say since I also had my auto insurance through them, they'd reduce it down to a 100-foot radius. If that makes any sense. Sixth, the woodpile had to be moved a minimum of 30 feet from the cabin. And finally, a really big one, every tree branch within a 200-foot radius of the cabin must be cut a minimum of 10 feet off the ground. But once again, they gave me the 100-foot radius option because of the auto insurance. But I still estimated that to be approximately 300 to 400 trees that had to be trimmed. Now, I'm not against being fire safe at my cabin because I'd hate to see my place burn down. And I've already done some of this stuff on a smaller scale over the years at a slow, steady, and reasonable pace. But they were demanding all this work be done by June 15th. I pleaded with them to give me more time because there was still a lot of snow up there this April, and I didn't have much time off at work available to me between April and June. My pleading fell on deaf ears. June 15th was the date they were sticking to. I couldn't see any possible way I could get all this work done by June 15th. So I made some calls to the professionals to get some quotes to at least have the big jobs done for me. Those quotes came in at nearly $30,000. That wasn't going to happen, so I figured I'd just have to suck it up and give it my best shot and see if I could get all this work done by June 15th myself. Brian, a friend of mine, and I drove down for the day to drop off my new wood chipper and stake out the 100-foot radius around the cabin. The following day, my brother drove down to help out wherever he could. We got some of the skirting done and tested the chipper. But we found out there was a big snowstorm rolling in the next afternoon, so we figured we'd better get out of the area the next morning while we still had a chance. Today, several friends and family drove down to give me a hand with all the tree trimming. Of course, you can't cut thousands of tree branches without the chances of someone finally taking one for the team. Ooh! After about 10 minutes of laughing, Steve was back on the ladder cutting more branches. By noon the next day, everybody had to head back home. It was a huge help having everybody here. My brother was able to squeeze out one more day before he had to go too. After that, I still had a lot of work to do, so I was back at it for the next few days. Everything that was asked of me by the insurance company was pretty much completed, except my wood chipper wouldn't keep up with all these piles of branches, or slash as the professionals call it. I had to try and find someone with a commercial grade chipper to come out and get rid of the piles before the first week of June, when the inspector would be coming back out, which was earlier than I expected. While speaking with the insurance company, they told me if I got the local fire marshal to come out and inspect the property, and I got a signed letter of approval from him and submitted it to the insurance company, they would continue my coverage with no further action necessary. So I called the local fire inspector, and he came out and gave me his approval and a signed letter. I submitted it to the insurance company, and they decided they wouldn't accept the letter from the fire marshal anymore. They were still going to send out their own inspector. On June 15th, the insurance company called me and said I failed the inspection. When I asked why, they said the inspector told them that the tree branches, brush, and grasses weren't trimmed or cleared within a 200-foot radius of the cabin. When I reminded them of the 100-foot radius option because of the auto insurance, they went ahead and continued my coverage on the cabin. As you watch the before and after footage of this project, I just want to add a couple more things the insurance company told me after the fact. They said I really didn't have to skirt the cabin. That was just a suggestion. And the trees really only needed to be trimmed 6 feet above the ground, not 10. If they'd been straight up with me in the first place, I wouldn't have had to rush so much, and I would have skirted the cabin the way I really wanted to, with stone, not some rushed, cheap method like I was forced to do because of the time crunch. And Steve wouldn't have nearly broken his leg cutting down branches that didn't need to be cut down, 2 or 3 feet higher than was necessary. Oh well, life at the cabin is still good.